Coming up January 15th on the Whimsy Farm podcast, I speak with Keith Runyan, General Secretary of Quaker Earthcare Witness, about his climate activism and recent journey to attend the COP30 in Brazil.
Roots of Quakerism are this idea of that of God in everyone, and are all of us having direct access to the inner light or to the divine, and how that relationship, how that connection to conscience, that connection to love, to spirit, immediately transitions out to outward action in the world. By the movements of the spirit, one must act. One wonderful organization started in the 1980s that started on a profound concern for the state of the environment, for the litany of environmental issues that kind of grew out in the popular consciousness from the 1960s through 70s. And Quakers just decided, historically they're a peace church. Quakers have a long history of social justice action, et cetera, but that central need to be not just a religion that takes the lead on those issues, but one that sees, that names earth care, that names that deep interrelationship and unity with nature as the heart, as part of the heart of Quaker spirituality. That was really a centerpiece of what Quaker Earthcare Witness was founded to advocate for, as well as the realization of that in the way that we take action. On that, we do local action. So we have a mini grants program to support climate justice work the world over, especially in Quaker communities. So, QEW is the largest network of Quaker environmentalists worldwide. The best scientific evidence suggests that for every 1,000 tons of CO2 in the atmosphere, that's the really rough estimate for about 1,000 tons is a single human mortality, not to mention massive impacts across the earth. And then you do that math, what we're talking about is about 1 million people per year saved over the course of the century. Like that. So it was saying, like, coal workers, how do you transition them into a new economy? You give massive incentives for companies to build new renewable infrastructure in old coal country. So the COPs, the Conference of the Parties, have been happening ever since the 90s, and they're what resulted in the Kyoto Protocol. They're what resulted in the Paris Agreement, and we just had this big COP30 in Belém, Brazil, in the heart of the Amazon. The process that is happening at these COPs, is as problematic as they are, and they are problematic, has produced international pressure and effort that has resulted in a dampening of the curve of that we're on. We largely participate with our Quaker allies, Quakers in Britain, Quaker United Nations office, but also with the broader interfaith community. There's something called the Interfaith Liaison Committee that is deeply involved in these negotiations, hosts a number of different side events and press conferences, and works to educate negotiators and take a broad faith stance on climate change that's able to push us in the direction of justice. And I would say that my number one thing that I would say I just adore about being involved in this process is working with this interfaith community. I mean, these are people who I find to be some of the most ethically committed people I've ever met, some of the most sincere. You were just talking about, anti-colonial, very, very like justice-centric, uplifting of indigenous wisdom and indigenous knowledge, like the crisis that we're in the United States as an example of how we find the light in the dark, and that what's happening here is just a echo of what's happened many times in history, and that we have many examples throughout history of how we can show up in deep courage and in deep faith. At this point, it'll take decades before the rest of the world will ever trust the US again, regardless of if we change our president in 2028. So that's a really deep wound. But I think that there's also, when I was talking to individual activists, the number of people who were just overjoyed that I was there, coming from the United States, to advocate and speak on the behalf of climate action and talk about resistance and talk about like that. There was just so much celebration, I think, of bringing people in. So much condemnation of the people who were not showing up, but celebration of people who were continuing to try to make that difference. I think the question I'd want to ask the audience, everyone can do their own check here, is to you, is hope something that's internal or external? As above, so below. There's, those things that are true at that very micro level can be true on the macro level. And I think there's a need for deep truth telling. Like, I do believe that joy and hope, those things, there's something really important about those in the way that we show up, that we need to be. But I think what maybe is the most important piece of it is aliveness.
Episode 19 of the Whimsy Farm podcast streams January 15th on my YouTube channel, Carolyn Crane and Whimsy Farm, on my website, whimsyfarm.net, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
whimsyfarms.net